Let's take a look at analyzing disparate impact cases. Because the plaintiff in a disparate impact case is claiming that some neutral requirement or practice has discriminatory effects, a specific requirement or practice must generally be cited as the culprit. An exception occurs when the plaintiff is unable to do so because multiple factors are involved in making the employment decision, such as hiring processes with numerous tests and interviews, and the scoring and weight of each factor are unclear. Neutral requirement or practice refers to anything other than protected class characteristics used as grounds for making employment decisions. To produce disparate impact, a requirement or practice has to fall more heavily on some protected class group than others. Examples of neutral requirements or practices that have sometimes been shown to have disparate impact include the following: written employment tests, height and weight requirements, language requirements, physical strengths tests, and limitation of employment based on arrests. The plaintiff has to present the court with evidence that any differences in outcomes across protected class groups are large and consistent enough that they would highly be unlikely to have occurred by simply chance. If the plaintiff fails to establish a prima facie case of disparate impact, the employer is not required to defend the challenge requirement or practice. On the other hand, if a prima facie case is established, the employer bears a relatively heavy burden in showing that the challenged requirement or practice is job-related and consistent with business necessity. When an employment test is involved, the employer usually must produce statistical evidence that the test is a good measure of ability to do a job. A requirement, like a strength, might be related to the ability to perform a job, but the specific amount of the strength required or the particular means used to assess the strength still might not be consistent with business necessity. Age-based disparate impact claims brought under the ADEA are handled differently than cases brought under other laws. The employer has the burden of showing that a challenged requirement or practice is a reasonable factor other than age. Considerations relevant to determining whether a factor other than age is reasonable include the extent to which the factor is applied fairly and accurately and the extent of the discriminatory impact and whether other options were considered. Employers need to be prepared to defend requirements or practices whose use results in disproportionate outcomes across protected class groups. Employers should not adopt employment practices without first meaningfully examining their potential discriminatory effects and the evidence supporting their job relatedness. If an employer shows that a challenged practice is job related and consistent with business necessity, then even though the practice produces unequal outcomes for different protected class groups, it's still legal. Disparate impact might be found if the plaintiff can show there is a feasible alternative practice that would produce more equal outcomes, but which the employer declines to use.